Hi, I'm Eric DeReese. Today we're going to talk about the Dolly and the Zoom. We're going to talk about how they're actually conducted. We're going to talk about when it's best to apply them. And then we're going to talk about what happens when you combine them together. Let's get started, shall we? The terms Dolly and Zoom are technical terms in video production. Both the term Dolly and the term Zoom refer to the moment in a film or video when the audience's visual perspective is brought closer to a certain spot in the scene. When a director tells a cameraman to conduct a Dolly or a Zoom, the command is almost the same for each. It's either to Dolly in or Dolly out, or zoom in or zoom out. The intention of these two actions are similar, but very different in action. The act of a Dolly is to move the camera physically closer to or farther from the object of focus in a scene. This actually changes the perspective of the scene. The act of a Zoom is to adjust the focal range of the camera so that its visual perspective of a scene is of a smaller or larger portion of the scene, but it does not change the perspective of the scene. When comparing how these two terms are applied in television production and film and video production, it becomes easier to understand how and why these two terms can be used. Live three-camera studio television production will often use both terms to set up a shot before it is used in a broadcast. But while they will rarely use the zoom during a live shot, they will in some cases dolly a shot during the live broadcast. This is one of the reasons why the large studio cameras are on tripods with wheels. But film and video production cameras are usually not on wheels unless there is an action scene involved. In this case, most dolly shots will be conducted on a mini track that looks and acts somewhat like railroad tracks, so as to keep each shot consistently on the same spot during each moment in a scene. Instead, in most cases, scenes in films are shot from a stationary camera. Consequently, the zoom is more likely to be used in a film than a dolly. It may be conducted with a physical camera lens during a shot in a scene, or in order to set up a shot, or after a shot during the editing process. The latter is referred to as an optical zoom. This is because not only can films be more expensive to shoot than live television shows, but they are designed to be fully planned out ahead of time so that fewer cameras can be used and perspective changes can be conducted later during the editing process. These two actions sound very similar in visual effect, but they're actually very different. In fact, they are so different that when they are combined, they can be used together to create what is called the Dolly Zoom, Zolly, or the vertigo effect. This effect looks as though an object or a person in the foreground is remaining stationary while the background is changing in size. This effect is applied with a zoom in and dolly out. Now, a zoom out and dolly in action will create an effect where the background stays the same while the foreground changes in size. The dolly zoom was first used in the Alfred Hitchcock film Vertigo as a way to create for the audience a feeling of disorientation. Like any special effect, the Zolly should only be used sparingly. Instead, most directors should just use the dolly and the zoom appropriately. Okay, so let's recap. We talked about the differences between the dolly and the zoom. A zoom is where you maintain the same perspective of the image on the screen, but you're actually shrinking the amount of that perspective. That's when you zoom in. And when you zoom out, you expand the amount of the same perspective that's on the screen. When you dolly in by pushing the camera forward, you dolly out by pulling the camera back, and that changes the actual perspective of what's on the screen. Now, when are these best applied? Well, a dolly is usually applied in television production, but it can be applied in film production if it's on a camera track. What's normally used in film production is a zoom, or even an optical zoom, and we talked about that as well. Then we talked about what happens when you combine the two. It creates what they call the vertigo effect, which is a feeling of disorientation. Because basically what happens is you've got the background and the subject of focus changing perspectives, but they're not in sync with each other. In fact, they're contradicting each other, and that creates the vertigo effect. Well, that's all for the Dolly Zoom. I'm Eric DeReese, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. Good luck on your film production.